Alright, today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to play Magic the Gathering. I'm going to teach you what is Magic the Gathering. I'm going to teach you what a card looks like, and I'm going to teach you what a board is going to look like. So if you already know any of those things, feel free to skip through it, but I suggest you guys watch it. Just you may not have learned something, or it's just good to go over the stuff again, because it's always good. Practice makes perfect, as they say. Or I like to say practice makes permanent. So, the first thing we're going to start off with is what is Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering was originally created as a card trading game. And because it was a card trading game, it was made for you to trade cards. But they also made a game to go along with it, so you could make decks and fight other people. A lot like if any of you guys have played Pokemon. So they kind of moved away from the card trading game and really went into the actual game of it. And a lot of people nowadays play Magic the Gathering as the game. So that's pretty much what Magic the Gathering has become, is a card game. And obviously it doesn't use normal cards, it doesn't use a normal deck of 52 cards. It has special cards made for the game. They look a lot like that. You may not be able to see it from down there. Move it a bit closer. That's a pretty complex card, so we'll go into what cards do later. But there's a whole bunch of different cards which we'll be going over. And some cards work really well together. Some cards don't work very well together. Some cards neutral. And there's different strategies of playing. Like there's combos, which is when cards work really well together. And they work so well that you can go off with them. There's aggro, where you play lots of cheaper cards, things that can just hit for damage. It's a quick game, you usually want it to end pretty quickly. And then there's kind of control, where you're using cards to control the board. So you're destroying their creatures, you're countering their spells, all that kind of stuff. So those are the three main kind of strategies of Magic Gathering, and there's so many more. But those are the three main that a lot of decks fall under. So, what is a card? That's a really good question. A card. These are lands. So lands are a type of card. There's so many different types of cards nowadays. I think there used to be about 6, but they've just added more and more. So these are what cards will look like. These are lands. So lands tap for what we like to call mana. And mana helps play spells. So if you look at the mana cost right there, you can see a white symbol, a red symbol, and a 1. So the white symbol means you need to use a land that produces white. Just like this plains here. This plains produces white. For the red symbol, it would be the same for a red land. I don't have a red land on me right now, so I can't show you, but you get the general idea. The 1 can be done with any type of mana. It can be a colorless mana, it can be a white mana, it can be a black mana, a green mana, red mana, or blue mana. Any mana, as long as you have that mana. So lots of lands are different. Some lands say basic lands, just like this forest or plains. Those both say basic lands. Some of them just say land, which means they're non-basic lands, but they are still lands. So lands are one type of card type, and there is about 5 other main card types. So you have the instant, you have the artifact, you have the enchantment, you have the creature, and let me just see if I have a sorcery on me. And you have the sorcery. So those are the 5 other main types of cards. And there's 3 of those ones stay on the board and are called permanent cards. Lands are part of the permanent card. and then you have creatures, you have enchantments, and you have artifacts. Those four are all part of the permanent cards. The instant and sorceries are a bit different. These are non-permanent cards. So what you do is you cast them for the 3 mana. So I may tap this and that. So I cast it for 3 mana. And once I cast it, it goes to the graveyard. It's over with. I'd have to get it back into my hand to recast it. Permanent cards is you play a land onto the board, and then I tap my lands, and let's say I bring out my creature. My creature now stays on the board till it gets killed, or exiled, or removed from the board. So that's kind of what a permanent card and a non-permanent card is. And you're probably wondering, well, what's the difference between instant and sorcery, and artifact and enchantment and creature? Instant and sorcery, the big difference, really the only difference, is instants, you can cast them at any time. As long as you have the priority, you can cast an instant. A sorcery, on the other hand, you cannot cast it on the other player's turn, and you can't cast it in response to stuff. So you have to wait till nothing else is going on, and you have priority, and you can cast a sorcery, and it's your turn. A creature is a permanent card, so you play it and it goes on the board. Now, one of the special things about a creature that you've probably noticed is it has these little 2 numbers down in the corner here. The 3 shows the power of the creature, and the 4 shows the toughness of the creature. The toughness of the creature is how much damage it can take before it dies, and the power of the creature is how much damage it can do to other things. An enchantment and an artifact are really similar. There's not much difference between the two of them. Artifacts generally usually are more equipment, or they have more abilities with them, or activated abilities. Enchantments, I find, have more triggered abilities, and I'll get into the different types of abilities later, but they're pretty similar. You play them on the board, and they can't usually attack. There is a few artifacts or enchantments that can attack, but they're usually a vehicle or a creature artifact. And vehicle we'll get into later. It's a more complicated thing. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of different card types at the end of the day, but these are the main ones that you'll be seeing the most often. So, now that you know what the cards look like, what does the board look like? Which is a good question, because you do need to know that to play Magic the Gathering. So a board, which I have right here, looks a lot like this. You usually have some sort of life total teller. If it's a dice, if it's one of these things. I usually use a dice, but I had this on me when I was working on this deck. And so I'm just showing you with this, and you can see it shows the 20. You'll have your deck, which has most of your cards in it. These are just the sleeves, so there's no cards in them right now. But you'll have your deck. You'll have your graveyard, which when something gets destroyed, it goes to there, or when something dies. So if a creature runs out of toughness, it goes to the graveyard. If an enchantment or artifact gets destroyed, it goes to the graveyard. Or if you cast an instant or sorcery, it would go to the graveyard. The exile is a bit more complicated. Exile, what we like to call removing it from the game. There are cards that exile your cards, and so you will be using the exile, but there's a lot less cards than if you're using the graveyard. So, at the start of the game, you would draw 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you have 7 cards in your hand. I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh, I don't really like these a whole lot. So what you can do is you can mulligan. And I'll get into mulliganing later because that's kind of the start of the game. But you are able to switch out cards so you don't have to be stuck with a really bad hand, because you do want to have a fun game. You don't want it to be a one-sided, really fast game unless you're like a really pro player that wants to win. So, I think that is most of it. Oh, one more thing. So you're probably yelling at me. You're like, how do you win this game? So, how do you win this game is a very good question, because the major way to win this game is everybody starts at 20 life, which you can see I have my spinner at 20. And when you get to 0 life, you will lose the game. So I take a whole bunch of damage. Oh, I'm down at 8 life. There's an 8 power creature coming over, and it hits me down to 0. So once I'm at 0, I lose the game. Now, there are exceptions to this. There's a few other ways to win the game without taking their life total to 0. There's a few ways to stop yourself from losing when it's at 0, but those are complicated things. You won't see them as much. They're more fun mechanics at the end of it, and so you're mostly going to be taking the other opponent down to 0 life. So that's really what you need to know. I went over what is Magic the Gathering, what cards are, what a board looks like, and how to win the game. I'll go more into depth with all of this stuff. This is just the first video, and feel free to watch it again if you're still confused about this stuff. Feel free to put questions down in the comments, and please remember to like and subscribe.